Chair now recognizes Ms. Walorski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate our witnesses that are here today, and I want to extend so much appreciation from my district in Indiana for the service of all of our witnesses here today. You three guys face an impossible task. China and the WHO lied about the extent of the crisis, and it's well documented that China used that time to hoard PPE that was vital to this country. To make matters worse, the Obama administration depleted the N95 masks from the Strategic National Stockpile during the 2009 H1N1 influenza outbreak and never replenished it. The odds were against you guys from the very beginning. Then you had a national media super eager to paint the worst possible picture. So for instance, the New York Times published an article on March 25th that said, amid desperate need for ventilators, calls grow for federal investigation, which said that the U.S. needed as many as 1 million ventilators to adequately respond to the pandemic, but only had 200,000 available. Admiral Polachek, did the U.S. really need 1 million ventilators?
Maybe I'll answer that. As an intensive care physician, I was incredibly involved early on with the allocation of every single ventilator, every single request. No, we did not need 1 million ventilators, and we did not need 40,000.
70 more.
In fact, the New York Times article mischaracterized a study by the Society of Critical Care Medicine, which estimated that over the course of the pandemic, as many as 1 million people could require ventilator treatment. That's a huge difference from needing 1 million ventilators. Whether this was an honest mistake or not, such an eye-popping number got a ton of attention. The figure was used in a second New York Times article, repeated by the other news outlets, and rocketed around Twitter and Facebook. A New York Times reporter tweeted the incorrect figure and said the Trump administration was dooming people to die. It was retweeted 471 times. He eventually tweeted a correction 3 days later. The correction was retweeted just 15 times, and he didn't even delete the original incorrect apocalyptic tweet. This is malpractice in the service of an agenda, in service of creating a narrative that at whatever cost. Frankly, this reminds me of the Russia collusion hoax that was a hoax we saw play out over the last few years. Report breathlessly, an alarming report, and by the time the story falls apart and has been disproven, everyone's moved to the next outrage.
Let me just say that during that time, we had the president of the Society for Critical Care Medicine at FEMA working with us to understand specifically what the ventilator needs was. My group put out guidance on how to dually ventilate people, along with the American Society of Anesthesiology, who had been working on transition of anesthesia machines. So we were involved. Every single ventilator decision went to the UCG to weigh the needs, and as far as we know, not a single person in this country was denied ventilation. And now, because of the DPA use, we'll have over 50,000 ventilators in the stockpile by next week.
Thank you. And just curious, how many ventilators did New York end up receiving?
Ma'am, I do not have the actual specific number, but I know there was first I asked for tens of thousands, which I think that number might have been 30 or 40. But New York ended up getting maybe about 10,000 ventilators. But I will need to provide the committee with actual specific numbers if I could. But the initial thought was a lot, but they got less than that.
And Admiral Polachek, again, you created a control tower to monitor medical supplies and demand. What's the status of the control tower on the role of the federal government and the Strategic National Stockpile in obtaining and distributing medical supplies to the states?
Yes, ma'am. So we've got business system information from essentially 90+% of the health medical supply chain. I could see it coming in from manufacturing, whether it be U.S. or overseas, being in their warehouses, and then distributed down to first responders, nursing homes, hospitals. We're also in the process of building that out, of getting actual wired connections to the 6,800 plus hospitals in the United States to get on-hand daily information, along with adding state warehouses to this. So you'll have a holistic approach and understanding of the supply chain from states, hospitals, national stockpile, and from the commercial side.
And I just want to say that when President Trump enacted the Defense Production Act, the state of Indiana got on board immediately, even in my district, and we are still producing domestically supplied PPE today. Thank you for your service, gentlemen. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlelady, for yielding back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Foster.